Hello and welcome back to the Good Leader podcast. This is our special edition called Stress Traps. We're looking particularly at issues that are facing people in church planting, church leadership or in the Christian charitable sector. And I'm really delighted today to welcome Andy Goodwin here. Andy, welcome to you.
Hi, welcome.
And you're a safeguarding officer. We've worked together quite a lot over the years. Tell me a bit about what you do and your history.
So my history from a safeguarding point of view, and generally I was a police officer in London for 30 years. When I completed my 30-year service, I joined the staff of HTB as the safeguarding advisor, and here I am now, having thought I'd be in the role for about a year, maybe 2 years, 8 years down the line, having learnt a lot.
Great.
Having absolutely developed along with HTB.
And you've been really involved in advising people in the church planting network as well about a healthy safeguarding practice.
Yeah.
Obviously, our assumption today is that we hope that everyone in our leadership network has done all of the appropriate safeguarding training and reporting, and that they are very much in line with the safeguarding teams within their own diocese around the UK and abroad. So anyone involved in this sector of leadership have to have done a significantly high level of training. That's our assumption.
Yeah, and that's the Church of England policy in terms of leadership. All clergy have to complete up to and including the leadership modules in safeguarding, which go into a lot of detail about good safeguarding practice in the church.
So today isn't really, if you're watching this podcast, a kind of one-stop shop in safeguarding. We're really adding on here a few highlights, we hope, to the training that you've already received. So we're not going to be reductive today. We just want to bring out of you, Andy, a few key points. You want to say a little bit to start with, just to really articulate the kind of core points of what you think good safeguarding practice really looks like practically.
Yeah, absolutely. And safeguarding is quite a complicated world, but actually it's quite simple as well. And I would always look at 4 key principles.
Okay.
The first one is recognising where there's a safeguarding concern, and recognising in particular where there's an immediate risk of harm. The second point is being able to respond well, and that means in simple terms listening, remembering you're not an investigator, showing acceptance. The third key point is about recording, and I don't mean literally recording. It's about making a note, recording appropriately, and particularly one key thing I think that is so important for church leaders is the importance of recording decision making and understanding the process of your decision making. That's very often helpful in understanding or recognising where, confirming that you've done or affirming that you've done the right thing. So good record keeping. And the fourth key point is refer. Always refer to your diocese if there's a safeguarding concern, or in some circumstances referring to statutory agencies, potentially the police, potentially social care teams, but always refer to your diocese.
That's really helpful to remember. So we've got recognising, respond, recording and referring.
The four R's.
Brilliant.
Okay. In no particular order.
Okay.
The 4 R's.
Let's press into those a little bit more deeply. I mean, as a previous church leader and someone who's been involved in the kind of network for quite a long time, I guess my concerns for safeguarding is that historically it might have been seen more as a sort of tick box exercise that we have to kind of get through. But that's a really negative way of looking at safeguarding, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a live and ongoing and almost daily practice today.
Yeah. It's a life skill. It's a life skill. And when I talk to all new staff joiners at HTB, and I absolutely impress upon them that point. It's a life skill. It's something that we should be, we should take into our personal lives. We should have an understanding of harm generally within our social circles, and knowing how to manage concerns that might come up there, but absolutely professionally, and certainly in a church context, having a really detailed understanding and actually passion for making it something lively, and as a church leader you can you can absolutely share that passion with your congregation, with your colleagues, so that everyone buys into this and they don't see it as you say, as a tick box exercise, which is totally negative.
And what you've learnt over the years is that leaders who really invest in safeguarding practice, who follow the 4 R's and who are known to be very live to conversations around safeguarding, tend to have safer churches.
Totally.
Just say a bit about that relationship between your energy and the culture of the church.
I think it is an energy. I think it's if you have that passion to help people and to support people, which is what church leaders are doing, isn't it? It's a front-facing people occupation. But if you have that passion and that energy, you will invest in it. You will invest in yourself, and you'll invest in your church. In terms of best practice, for example, the things that we get wrong sometimes are the basics, because we don't have the time, or we don't invest in enough to do that. But by that I mean the basics, or by the basics I mean the simple things, such as safer recruitment. Making sure, are we recruiting the right people? Are we reference checking, for example? Are we making sure we've got DBS references where appropriate? Those are the basics. It's poor admin that might let us down. The other big potential risk of failure is a misunderstanding of data retention.
Okay,
and that's
say
really
a bit more about that.
Important. Well, I mean, in terms of there's always an anxiety about one of the toughest challenges, I think, generally is an understanding what GDPR stands for, what GDPR means. And there's a big fear that we can't record things, that we can't retain information, and most importantly, that we can't share information. But actually, if you have an understanding and a recognition that you are there to, in the safeguarding context, to support somebody and prevent harm, then it's easier to understand where your responsibilities around data protection are much easier to handle. But absolutely not being afraid to share information if it's appropriate. And you can be guided through your diocese where that's the case, but don't allow that fear to hold you back from retaining, or absolutely not from recording information and retaining it with a view to sharing it if it's proportionate to do so.
And you said to me, and I know there've been a number of instances you've been involved in over the years, where just 2 reports from 2 different individuals have, if you like, revealed a significant net of problems. You said it's just two historic references to the same person is a very, very significant indicator that something's wrong. I mean, obviously absolutely. One can be a significant one, but that's why reporting is so important. Reporting
and recording is so important. It's really interesting, and I find it time and time again where a concern is raised about an individual, and then when I look back on past records, the same concern was raised maybe several years earlier, and that's really helpful in building a healthy picture about a potential risk that person might cause.
And another aspect of this, which is a kind of another implicit aspect to being really invested in safeguarding culture, is that people who might have more malevolent ambition would avoid a church or a charity or an organisation where they think that there's outstanding safeguarding practice.
Absolutely, and that comes back, and that that's absolutely evidence, isn't it, in the point I make about good admin. If you have clear processes and policies and you're advertising widely that you are a safe church, it can be the most basic thing, like putting posters up and ensuring that when you are recruiting to key positions, for example, youth leaders, that you are being absolutely clear about the hoops that you have to jump through to become a youth leader.
All of this information that you're giving now, Andy, I'm hoping is generating in our church leaders and church planters an ambition to recognise that efforts placed into safeguarding ultimately will pay dividends, because they will protect a huge amount of harms from occurring potentially in an organisation. So it's an investment which is worth making, a significant investment that's really worth making.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at past failure, when you learn from past mistakes, those elements are not there.
Okay.
Those elements are not there.
Now, we're coming to wrap up this session, but I would love you to talk about that kind of bigger view of safeguarding, because we talk about obviously the 4 R's as being really important, and we will have an idea around what we're doing when we're safeguarding the church, but actually you talk about it more in cultural terms.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said, and I've always, in fact, as soon as I started in this role, I always said and spoke about culture as being the most important part of safeguarding. And it's about maintaining or creating a safe environment is the principal cause of good safeguarding. Principal part of good safeguarding. Having a safe environment where anything inappropriate can be challenged. And again, looking at past failure, that hasn't been there. And we don't have to look too far. The Me Too movement, for example, and also within faith organisations where that culture's not existed, people have been too afraid to raise concerns, particularly about leadership. Okay. And of course, within churches, we have that dynamic we have a complex dynamic of leadership, don't we? Yeah. Where there's a spiritual and a managerial level, and that creates a huge anxiety. That power imbalance creates a huge anxiety around being able to raise a concern. But if we as church leaders, or if you as church leaders, have created that culture where that can be challenged safely, good, healthy culture where your own accountability is absolutely at the centre, then we won't have failure.
That is a really, really important thing to state. I think particularly now with so many incidences of misuse of power in leadership. And of course, safeguarding isn't monodimensional, is it? It's not purely around sexual abuse. Yeah. There is safeguarding around bullying and control and coercive behaviours as well. And some of those behaviours are quite specific to leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say a bit more.
That's a really interesting point, because what does harm look like? Absolutely includes bullying. Of course it does. And you have with that spiritual element, you have that really confused sort of dynamic.
Mixed dynamic.
There's real complex issues there. But bullying is a safeguarding issue. Yeah. And that creates some huge challenges for a leader. But if that leader has created that safe environment and has emphasised the importance of open communication, their own accountability, then that problem won't exist.
That is the word I want to end this session on. It's accountability. And we've talked about that in other sessions. Creating a leadership culture where you're able to be criticised, you're able to receive feedback, and also you're able to receive critique and feedback from peers, and that creates that sort of awareness for healthy and constructive cultures.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this has been so helpful. As I've said to you today, specifically about today's session, I think it's really important to recognise that this is just an addition to other safeguarding resources and trainings that you will have received. This is not meant to be a sort of one-stop shop on this area, and there'll be more information in the notes for you to explore. We really want to encourage you to build on some of the things that Andy's said today, particularly around the 4 R's of good safeguarding practice, but also thinking dynamically about this idea of creating really healthy cultures of safeguarding where people feel safe to bring concerns to leadership and to other people who have positions of safeguarding responsibility, but also leaders themselves, thinking about how they are interacting with the people in their care, looking at areas like control or power or bullying in leadership, and working out how we can create cultures that are safe and inclusive and helpful to everybody. So I hope this has been a really helpful session for you, and as I say, look forward to seeing you really soon. Do check out the notes for some further work on this area. Thanks so much and have a really great day.